some more other stragglers coming through. I'm Kathy Harder. I'm president of the Ohio State Medical Association Alliance, and this weekend we are meeting as for our annual meeting. And we thought tonight we'd do something different, is to bring in a speaker to talk about what the AMA has been doing and the AMA Alliance has been doing over this year and a half on a survey that represents what's happening with physicians as well as physicians' families. So you're going to hear really all new information that's happening that's out there. So I'm really glad everybody's here. I would love to introduce to you Rachel Kunich. She is our president of the AMA Alliance. And this year and a half, she's been a part of the AMA Alliance for years now. And what's been wonderful, yeah, along with myself. And so what's been great is that they've been working really hard over these years to bring good information, quality programs around the country. And so tonight I want you to meet Rachel, and she's also going to introduce Kendra. Thank you.
Well, good evening, you guys. Thank you for coming. And yes, I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speaker here. But I want to give you a little bit of a background on the survey. So back in the late 90s, 1999, the AMA Alliance wanted to get a survey going to kind of get a pulse on the physician family. And they partnered with Dr. Wayne Sotil, who happens to be just down the block, just down the road from me in North Carolina, in Davidson, North Carolina. But they structured this survey and reached out and had about 600 respondents. So now we're coming to 2022, and we haven't had that survey for a while. We really wanted to get a pulse of where the physician family is now, and really give us some idea on what are the needs, what do we need to do to be taking care of our physician family. So through some great work of a lot of promotion by social media, Kendra being really a great driver of that, we had 1,700 respondents to the survey, most of whom do not know about the Alliance and definitely were not Alliance members. So really it got some good information from that. And what we glean from that will give us ideas on what to do going forward. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to our catalyst and really the driver for this project, Kendra Harvey. Kendra is a life coach, writer, and presenter with a big heart for the physician family community. Her journey began in 2004 when she married a medical student and quickly saw the need for more support and resources for medical families. Kendra started out blogging and eventually became a coach, focusing on helping physician spouses navigate the unique challenges of being married to medicine. Over the last 3 years, Kendra has served as an enthusiastic volunteer with the AMA Alliance, leading the Physician Family Health and Wellness Committee and driving the 2023 Physician Family Experience Survey. And this year, she's honored to be an ambassador for the Dr. Lorna Breen Heroes Foundation. When she's not working individually with physician spouses, diving into research, or contributing her time and experience to the AMA Alliance, Kendra cherishes time with her family. She and her husband, Adrian, a neurosurgeon practicing in Fort Worth, have 5 children, ranging from 19 to 7. I don't think she sleeps. You might catch her enjoying a good book, taking long walks, shuttling kids around, or tidying up. She loves making things neat and organized. And so I give you Kendra Harvey. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I've been told to bring this a little closer, so is that good? All right, thank you so much. Oh, it's not. Fix this,
I'm
Tom.
going to fix this so that
Do it right.
anyone who wants to have
Kathy's so like me, and you guys are
Thank
tall.
you.
Yeah.
We had the end.
Now we're good? We're gonna be good. We're gonna be so good. Okay, whoa. It's gonna be fun. You're all good. It's okay. We're good. We've got this. So good evening. Thank you so much, Kathy, and for the Ohio State Medical Association Alliance
pleasure to talk about one of my favorite topics. And I say one of my favorite topics because I have several, but this is certainly at the forefront of it. So, as Rachel said, this project has spanned 2 Alliance presidents. And so we have the support of Jacqueline Wynn, who really, she kind of put everything into motion. I had a big idea, and I approached Jacqueline, and I said, this is what I think we should do. And she's like, that sounds like a great idea. And then it's like, oh, well, it was a good idea, I think you should do it. Like, somebody else should do it. This was a great idea. Have you ever had an idea like that? Where it's like, I'll have the idea, and somebody else should do it. And she said, no, I think you should do it. And I said, oh, fine, I'll do it. And I'm very glad I did. I'm grateful for the support of Rachel Kunish also. And then as we go into this next year, Pat Klecki. So, oh dear. Rachel said a little bit about the project, but there's a little bit more. You're going to hear maybe some duplication of it. I am sorry, this is really, I feel like I should be breaking out in song. This project has a lot of significance. It also has a lot of statistics. So the survey had 94 questions, and a lot of people took the survey. We're going to talk about exactly how many, but we have a lot of data to go through. And so we're still in the beginning stages of getting all of that data put together and correlated. But what we've found so far is really exciting. So even before I approached the AMAA about doing the survey, I had been asked to speak to the Coalition for Physician Wellbeing, along with Donna Rubio. She is the editor of Physician Family Alliance in Motion magazine. And they asked us to speak on the topic of physician burnout from the spouse's perspective. And I knew that we had a problem in our community. I knew that we had this physician burnout problem that's been looming for a really long time. But I also knew that within our own communities, we had some problems too. So I had observed it in my own life, I had seen it in others, and I knew that it was a problem. Like, this is affecting more than just our physicians, but why isn't anybody talking about what it does to everybody else? And that we should certainly do something about that. What somebody else rightly pointed out is if something exists in the world, but it's not actually documented or published, does it really exist? So our doctors here, if something doesn't exist in the literature, does it really exist? And so that's one of the things that we would like to solve. We'd like to have that published. So as Rachel mentioned, Dr. Sotil has been instrumental in helping us. And it was through my research for this presentation for the Coalition of Physician Wellbeing that I found Dr. Sotil's book, The Medical Marriage. It's an old book. I see lots of heads nodding there. So this topic of physicians' relationships and kind of the impact that a physician's lifestyle has on their family was a really popular topic in the 80s and in the 90s and the early 2000s, and then we see nothing. It disappears. But there was something else that came up in its place, and that was physician burnout. So he wrote this in conjunction with his wife, Mary Sotil, and it was published by the American Medical Association. And so you can still get a copy of it today. It's still very pertinent, but one of the questions that I had was, is this still relevant? Like, I knew that it still was, but again, unless it's documented, does this problem still exist? So pictured here, this is Dr. Sotil. I believe he's in his 70s now. He's spry, sharp as a tack. Love him. And he and his family, they have devoted their life to studying physician families. They have a clinic, they do counseling, they do coaching, they do research, they publish articles, they contribute articles to our Physician Family magazine. They are really involved in physician families. He spoke at our national meeting last year. Many of you were there and got to hear from him. He also contributes frequently to the magazine, so we get to see him in a lot of different places. The gentleman on the right, you might not know as well, that is Dr. Tate Shanafelt. He is the Chief Wellness Officer at Stanford Medicine, and he's the Associate Dean at the Stanford School of Medicine. And he's credited with the first academic study on physician burnout and how it relates to patient care. And so he published this paper as resident. And from that moment on, that is the topic that gained a lot of momentum and a lot of popularity. And he's continued to publish on that. In 2013, he co-authored a paper on physician relationships and covered a lot of the things that we are going to be talking about today. So for the past 20 years, physician burnout has kind of been the theme. Families have kind of taken a backseat. It's all been about organization, what types of things can we make improvements or implementations for, but it hasn't changed much. So anybody who knows a physician or loves a physician knows that it is still a problem. And in a recent JAMA article, this was back in October, they actually suggest that physician burnout is getting worse, not better. And this isn't good news for our patients, it's not good news for our families. And the AMA Alliance is really grateful to these two gentlemen who helped us collaborate on designing this survey. So we work with both of them, we use parts of their original surveys to come up with our own survey, and we're just grateful that they both recognize, obviously Dr. Sotil always has, and Dr. Schanfeld is right there with us now. We're grateful to have them as allies and that they support the work that we're doing. So with physician family burnout is kind of the backdrop for this project. We approached it with these three objectives in mind. The first was to increase the brand awareness of the AMA Alliance and really focus on planting seeds for potential membership. The second was to inform our future programming and offers to make sure that what we're offering to our members is both current and relevant, that we're using up-to-date information to inform our decisions. And then the third is to increase academic interest in physician families. And again, after all that, if it isn't published, does it exist? So we're happy to say that we've seen improvements in all three of these areas. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So the survey was open, this was last year, so 2023. It was open from March 27th through April 15th. And so for those 2.5 weeks, we received responses from 1,756 participants. Of those, 63% completed the survey, spending just over 15 minutes on this survey. Now, when I told my husband that, he's like, they did what? Because he gets paid to take surveys. I'm like, no, they just did this. They spent 15 minutes. We didn't have to bribe them. We didn't have to pay them. We didn't promise them anything in return. They gave us 15 minutes, and this is a remarkable feat and a remarkable amount of people in general to have take your survey. I think they wanted to be heard from. What do you think? So one of the ways that we reached this many people was, I mean, it would have been nice if we had that many members and everybody was engaged and they all took the survey. That wasn't exactly how it happened, but we're grateful for those who did. We couldn't have accomplished this without the outside physician community. So we created something that they were interested in, that was a topic they wanted to hear about, and they were excited to talk about, and they were excited to share. When we asked participants how they heard about the survey, 29% reported that it was from an AMA Alliance generated source, either a Facebook post, an email, could have been a website, or something from their local in-state alliance. And I know Ohio did a great job sharing the survey, so thank you. The overwhelming majority, however, came from outside the alliance. And this is actually really good news. It tells us that there's a lot of people who are interested in physician families. But not only interested, they were interested in sharing it with their friends. So it wasn't just for themselves. It's like, oh, I have a friend from medical school, or I have a friend from residency. I'm going to send this to the people that I know, and they did. One of the ways we also did this was by partnering with private Facebook groups. We'll talk about those in a minute. We also leveraged some popular social media accounts and people we knew that had large email lists that were communicating with physician spouses on a regular basis. So again, physician families, they're not members, they have no affiliation. In many cases, they don't even know about us. They saw it, thought it was valuable, and they shared it. And then when we asked them if they'd heard of the AMA before taking the survey, we have 73% that said no, no idea that we even existed. And then 27% responded yes. And then when we further asked them, are you a member of the Alliance? 19% of the respondents indicated that they were members, and the remainder 81 as non-members. And as you can see, we asked another question. It was not just, are you a member, yes or no? It was, are you a member? And then if it's no, it was like, no, I'm good. Like, no, I'm good. I don't need anything. This is just interesting. Or no, but I would like to know more. So 55% fell into the I'm good category and 26% into the I would like to know more. So we learned several valuable lessons from this data, and I think it's useful not only for our national organization, but also for our state and counties. And that is that if potential members who know nothing about our organization, they will engage with us when they see that what we're offering is valuable and meaningful to them and their families. And then when we make that connection, we see magic happen. We also learned that we need a public relations campaign. Like, it's not enough to have a website, and it's not enough to have a Facebook group. We really need not only the organization, but the members themselves to be excited about sharing what they're doing in the Alliance and what the Alliance has meant to them and to their families. We have a 100-year history of connecting, educating, and advocating, and to have so many people who have no idea the organization exists just seems, it's heartbreaking to know that that's the case. Again, the good news for our state and county alliances is as we grow this visibility, that benefits all of us. It benefits our national organization as well as our state and counties. So this is where I kind of go on a little tangent because this didn't actually come from a survey. So I pay attention to a lot of things. We were talking earlier about, there's some people who create content and post on Facebook a lot, and then there are some people who just kind of observe what is happening in the world, and I'm a really good observer. And so for the last 12 months, I pay attention to what kind of topics are really getting people excited. And you can tell because they like these posts, they comment on the posts, they make comments, they're interacting with people. And not just on the AMA Alliance side, but in general, what is the physician family community talking about? And so for the last 12 months, these are some of the topics that have gotten increased exposure as far as the number of people who are engaging. Physician burnout, physician suicide, the state licensing and mental health questions, Medicare legislation, and then just general disillusionment with life. So I'm going to share one example that speaks to this physician suicide point. Is in October, the AMA Alliance, we hosted a call with the author Betsy Gall. She wrote the book, The Illusion of the Perfect Profession. And in that book, she talks about her experiences. It's remarkable. She started keeping a journal around the same time that all of this was going on. So she has these very raw and emotional accounts of the weeks and months leading up to her husband's death, eventually by suicide. And so her husband dies, leaves her a single mother. She's got 3 adolescent kids, and it's just this amazing story of this woman and her family, kind of the things that you can kind of see happening in their lives, and you can kind of see where the breakdowns of system and organizations just kind of failed this family. It was an amazing and an impactful event, and we opened this call up to everybody in our community, not just typically we have all members calls where you're a member of the Alliance, you join a call. This was broadcast to everybody. And 2 things of note that I took away from her presentation. The first was that on the call she said, I wish I had known about the Alliance. Prior to that, probably prior to us reaching out to her to invite her to speak, she had no idea that we existed. And she was like lamenting that, like, I could have used that and I didn't have it. And that is a shame. We've since fixed that problem. She is now a member of the Alliance. The other thing that I noticed from that call is that it's by far the largest number of registered attendees we have had when we've opened up a call like this to anybody. People really wanted to hear about this, and the numbers don't lie. As we're looking at the things that we do, when we get that kind of data, that is a huge green light. People want to hear more about this, for this thing that we're doing, this was successful. How can we replicate this, and how can we do that again with another topic? Returning to the survey though, we asked participants if they would like to have access to online support services that were designed specifically for physician families. You can see, maybe you can see that tiny little green line, that represents 3% of the people who said no. Not interested, I don't care, I don't want anything else. That leaves 97% that were split between maybe, which could tell us, maybe depending on the topic or what you were talking about, and then the other 55% was, or 55% was, you get the idea. 97%, yes, they're interested. When we provide what they want, they will be there. Overwhelmingly, physician families are looking for trusted and reliable information for the unique challenges that their physician families face. And this was true 20 years ago when I became part of a physician family. Rachel mentioned, I married my husband when he was a third-year medical student. And so at this point, he's already finished all of the classwork. He moved away from campus. He was doing rotations. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, this is like a whole new world. I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what is Match, what is, like, what are all of these things that are coming up? And I didn't have anybody I could talk to. So I really felt alone during that time. And then during residency, I remember it was, you have one of those really bad nights that you remember for the rest of your life. And I think I was probably, it's like PGY 5, and I remember it was like 10:30 at night and he's still not home. The kids are in bed, and I'm looking up stuff on the internet, like, come on. Is this what my life's gonna be like forever? Like, I can't do this anymore. Where can I go? What can I find? Any guesses what I found? I found nothing.
Oh.
Nothing. There was nothing. What I did find, there was a group of other women who were just like me, also just frustrated. I found them, and they were trying to do things, and so together we're kind of trying, but why are we, where are all of the other people who've already done this and could tell us how this works? And if those resources exist, we didn't know how to find them or how to go about getting them. And this was probably true up until 4 or 5 years ago when I joined the Alliance. I did not know that you existed, and that wasn't for lack of trying. There are people in your area right now, in your counties, in your states, who are at home looking for what you have to offer, and maybe they can't find you. So I'm going to ask, are you making it easy for them to find you? And are you making it easy for them to join you? So our last objective was to increase academic interest in researching physician families. And I am pleased to report that since the survey closed, we have the research of another physician spouse on record. It is published. It was published late last, I guess it was October, in the fall. Dr. Sarah Grimer, she did her PhD dissertation on when perceived physician burnout leads to family burnout, how secondary emotional trauma impacts physician spouses. So she collected her data during the pandemic years. When I talked to her, she says, I have so much data. I can write several papers. And of course, my heart just was like, yes! We need several papers. And so we're excited for that to happen. There's also another physician out of Florida, or physician spouse in Florida. She's working on her PhD dissertation, studying physician burnout from the spouse's perspective. And these are important topics. They're important topics to these individuals who are doing the work. They're important topics to our families. And I think the fact that they are being spearheaded by physician spouses, they are going on and furthering their education. And like, this is a problem, and I want to figure it out. I hope there are many more of these papers to come. So where does that leave our survey? So when the survey collection period ended in April, we cobbled together our results. I cobbled together our results. And with Dr. Sotiel, he presented those at the AMA Alliance meeting in Nashville. Fortuitously, the table that I was sitting at, I was sitting next to Jenny Shepard, also from Texas, and she leans over to me and she goes, I know somebody who could help you with that data if you wanted to do something with it. And I said, that would be great. handed me her business card and it had the name of Dr. Lori Boyes. And so I contacted Lori Boyes that summer. She is a professor at St. Mary's University. And between her and her undergraduate students, they have done the bulk of verifying the original analysis that we made. So this wasn't, when we started this survey, this wasn't supposed to be an academic study. I'm not an academic, but I'm curious. But getting those things in motion, talking to people, and then seeing the response from our community, we knew that we had something bigger and that it needed to be published to get the recognition that it deserves and that all of our physician families deserve. So since that time, we have received IRB approval, and we have added Lori Boyes as a statistician on the project, and we've also added some academic writers who have experience writing these kinds of papers. And so we're hoping that there's going to be something ready to publish during the next president's term. Sadly, Rachel.
It's not sad, it's great.
It is great, but I really wanted it for your year. I really wanted it for you. So now, let's talk about the actual numbers, because I know that's why you're here. So, and again, this is the part where I have to say I'm not a statistician by any stretch of the imagination, although if you would have asked me in Nashville, I would have said I just got a crash course on how to do that, because I saw numbers for days and days and days every time I would close my eyes. So again, credit to Dr. Lori Boyes and her undergraduate students. They really carried the bulk of this weight. All right, so when we talk about statistical significance, we're not talking about a causal relationship. We're only talking about correlation. And correlation does not always equal causation. So what we were interested in most were what are some of the measures that are the most indicative of life satisfaction. And the design of the survey was such that we asked kind of that same question a couple of times, asking about, how satisfied are you with your life? And then we asked some other questions around it that we were then able to use to correlate their responses with, how do you actually view your life? And there were some things that really made no difference. One of those things is it didn't matter if you were a man or a woman. It didn't matter whether your partner was a man or a woman. It didn't matter how much education you had. It didn't matter how many children you had, which I was kind of disappointed. I thought for sure it must be harder, or life must be, it had to have some effect. It also didn't matter which PGY status you were, so whether you were a PGY 1 family or you were a PGY 7, that didn't have a statistical difference in your overall life satisfaction. Also, for most of you in this room, after 15 years post-residency, that didn't seem to have a big effect on your life satisfaction. Conversely, some things that did have a significant difference were being in residency. Anybody who remembers being in residency, this is like, it was so, not that it's not funny, but when we looked at the overall life satisfaction, medical students were like here, and then residents were here, and then everybody just kind of went up from there. So we can all recognize that residency is just a really hard period of time. And now we have it in the data that says, yeah, you're right. The other things that were statistically significant were those who had student loans, and that tracks with a family in residency, as does a salary of less than $100,000. So residency is just hard. We also saw if your student loans were lower, your overall life satisfaction was higher. And again, this kind of tracks when you're in residency, graduation, that's probably the peak of your student loan balances, and hopefully from that point on, they start coming down. We're gonna jump and talk about this for a second. The economic landscape that our medical students and our residents and our early career physicians are facing is staggering. It is completely different. So this is from the Association of American Medical Colleges. So they say the cost of medical school after making adjustments for inflation has increased by 372%. Yes. The average physician today, The average physician today is going to have, by graduation, a student loan balance of close to $440,000. And that's their education loan, plus interest, which right now, according to them, the interest rate was averaging 6.54%. For some people, it's probably higher. And now to really make it worse, if you've looked at real estate recently or bought groceries recently, that coupled with decades of physician reimbursements being stagnant, our medical school families, our resident families, and our early career physicians, they're living in a completely different world than those who graduated 10, 15, 20, and even more years ago. So some good news. Once you hit the age of 50, your life does seem to improve, statistically speaking. And so I do take this as good news because next year, I know, aren't you just happy? There's so much good news for you folks after 50, let me tell you. But my birthday next year, that will be me. I will be right there. And then we also can see correlations with adequate sleep and adequate exercise. So there are obviously some really interesting things to take away from this. There are some things you're not able to change today. If you're in residency, eventually residency will end. If you have student loan debt, eventually that debt will be gone. Every day you're alive brings you one step closer to that magic number of 50. I know, something to look forward to. And then there are some things that we can do to influence our life satisfaction, like sleep and exercise, but you did not come to hear about sleep and exercise. Nobody does. So let's talk about 3 of the big driving factors for life satisfaction, because this is where things really get interesting. And we can see 3 categories kind of emerge. These categories are the physician-spouse relationship, which is composed of the time you spend together, the quality of that time, the years that you've been with your partner, and whether or not you participated in counseling, and that's going to be something interesting when we get to it. The second one is community. Do you feel left out? Do you feel isolated? What is your community structure like? And then the third one is AMA membership and pride in the medical family. So these 3 things were the largest indicators of overall life satisfaction. So we're going to spend some time talking about each of those. So first we're going to take a look at the physician-spouse relationship as it relates to time spent alone together. And what you can see here is that as you increase the amount of time that you spend with your partner, it's like magic. Your life satisfaction also increases. And the higher you go, the better it gets. It's like, okay, well that seems like it should be somewhat intuitive, but there's this magic spot at just over 91 minutes that seems to have the biggest difference. If you can get 91 minutes with your spouse every day, on average, you're not going to get that every day. Your chances of having a higher life satisfaction dramatically increase. Obviously, people who are spending less than 20 minutes with their significant other, their life satisfaction suffers for it. And the way this question was phrased is also important because I think it was Dr. Sotil who said, when he asked it the first time, it was, how much time do you spend alone? And he's like, if I were to ask that again, if I want it to be alone and awake. Like, you can't count the time you spend sleeping. That's not going to do the same thing. But here's the really interesting part. When we look at the data that Dr. Sotil had, and when we look at the data that Dr. Shanafelt had, what we can see is we kind of have a problem. So this yellow mark right there in the middle, that was our survey result. What we have is we have fewer people spending 90 minutes or more with their spouse as compared to 10 years ago and 20 years ago. So the amount of time that we're spending together is decreasing. You can see it didn't really change that much in the less than 20 minutes or the 21 to 45. All of the change is right here, kind of in this crucible. It's like, right here, that's the problem. We're spending less than 90 minutes with one another. 27% of respondents reported more than 90 minutes in 2023, and that means 73% are spending less than 90 minutes. That's a huge chunk of our physician families who aren't getting good time with their spouses. Because what do relationships require? They require time and commitment, and for a lot of our physician families, they are engaged in doing something else. What are they doing? working. Yeah, they're at work, and so this poses a really interesting challenge for all of us, is what do you do if you don't have a lot of time, and it seems like time is one of those things that you can't ever get enough of. How are we supposed to get 91 minutes together? Any ideas? How are you going to get 90 minutes together? More than 91. Become what?
Become a caddy.
Become a caddy. Like, change jobs is really kind of what I'm hearing you say. Yeah, we could change jobs. We could do that. Probably not, but we could. Here we go. So in Dr. Soastiel's book, The Medical Marriage, he says, whether you are a physician or the spouse of a physician, when it comes to the types and level of stress that fills your days, you must accept that you are living an abnormal life. The coping patterns that emerge from such a stressful life can become a major complicating factor in keeping your marriage alive. So I want you to be thinking about maybe what are some of your coping strategies when life is difficult, when time is short, when you're just not feeling that great. And then a little bit later, he reminds us that you gained your station in life by doing more than other people. You studied more, you worked more, you sacrificed more, and endured more. And if you want to escape becoming one of those couples who are living together in semi-misery, enduring rather than enjoying each other, you will have to do more for your marriage than they do for theirs. And so I can kind of relate this to, if you have a friend and their partner works 40 hours a week and yours is working 80 hours a week, you actually have to work harder on your relationship than they do, because you're not going to accidentally spend time together in the same way. You have less of that resource to work with in the first place, and so you have to be more intentional about how you use that time. And, what are you going to do at that time? How many times have you maybe sat in bed next to your spouse, but you're doing two different things? Like, they're watching a movie and you're scrolling on your phone, or you're both in the house, but you're in two different rooms. Again, alone and awake? Yes. But are we alone, awake, and are we connecting? The good news is that even, regular and consistent investments of time pays dividends over time for both partners, if you're lucky enough to keep them, if you're lucky enough to make it that far. The partners who reported over 20 years with their spouse are also the ones that have the highest mean life satisfaction. And if you think about it, it's this time, the first 1 to 5 years, 6 to 10 years, those could potentially be the training years. There's small children, there's not a lot of sleep, there's not a lot of money, there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of things kind of going against you, and those types of things tend to trickle off a little bit by the time you've been married for 20 years. And so again, I hate to be like, oh, well, it'll get better eventually, because nobody wants to hear that. What we want to hear is it can get better now. So we're going to talk about some of the things, this time being one of the main drivers. Let's move on to some other factors that affect your relationship, and statistically so in our survey. Specifically, like how do things like showing appreciation, arguing, and being too tired to spend time with your spouse, how does that affect satisfaction? And so this first graph on the left, this is answering the question, my partner voices appreciation for the contributions that I make to our life together. And let's see if this works. Down here, that's never a whopping 50. And then you can see it builds. The more appreciation you get, and we can do this both ways. The more appreciation you show your spouse, I'm sure they also have the same. We're talking about this here. The more appreciated that you feel, and the more often you hear that appreciation, the higher your scores go. So this one right here is always, and that looks like it's at 80 for the mean life satisfaction score. And on the other side, we've got life satisfaction versus arguing with your partner about how much they work or what work they're bringing home. Anything that is an argument around work. And those that are never are up there at 82, and it trends down until always at 56. Now, that seems, again, some of these things do tend to just make intuitive sense, that if your partner is showing you appreciation, if you aren't having regular arguments about your spouse bringing home work or how long they're staying at work, chances are good the satisfaction you feel with your life at that time is going to be greater than those who are feeling like they're never appreciated and that they're always arguing about work with their partner.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So the 61, is it, what is this, I'm just trying to understand the number. Is it, it's not 70.18, is it, Kendra, what is?
It is. That's the mean life satisfaction.
Oh, so you
score.
went out to that many significant, okay, I'm just curious. That's interesting.
Yeah, don't ask me about the error bars. I just know really tight error bars are good.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
the bigger ones are not.
Yeah.
Not so good.
No, I'm surprised they went out to 2 digits out there. So-
I know. I'll tell Elias. You did that.
Sorry.
That was awesome. All right, let's move to the next one. This is the third factor, and this is how often does your partner come home from work too tired to do the things that you want to do? Maybe it's like we've been waiting all day. We're gonna go to the park, and your partner comes home and is like, "I'm too tired. I don't want to go to the park." Or, "Can we watch a movie tonight?" "No, I'm too tired tonight." So how often does your partner come home too tired to do the things that you would like to do? And in this graph, you can see we've got at the highest point there is never, and that looks like it's about 89. And then it goes down as we move from never to a few times a year or less, or once a month or less, a few times a month, once a week, a few times a week. Every day we see that declining. And again, I just want to point out that these go both ways. There's been some times where I'm working a lot and I'm like, I'm too tired. Or I recognize maybe I am, or I want to be appreciated more. And it's like, when is the last time I showed appreciation to my spouse? Am I putting forth the same type of effort that I am expecting in return? And so again, some of these just make intuitive sense to us, but they can be a really good indicator of the health of your relationship by paying attention to how often are these things going on. Also of note is that having a supportive spouse or partner has been shown to be a deterrent to physician burnout, and high levels of marital satisfaction have been shown to predict work satisfaction for physicians. So a thriving relationship is good for everybody. Now earlier I said we were going to talk about participation in counseling, because this is where we see some really interesting things, so we're going to spend some time talking about this. When we talk about the physician-spouse relationship in regards to counseling, what we end up seeing is that those who have never participated in counseling reported the highest life need satisfaction. We'll get to that. Followed by those who said, yes, I have in the past, several times a year, 1 to 2 months, and then working our way down to weekly or more often. And those who said weekly or more often have the lowest mean satisfaction. And that would track with having a current challenge or issue that you're working on. If you are going to see somebody for help, there's something that you recognize is wrong or could be better that you're working on so that you can increase that life satisfaction. And again, this is a caveat, it's important to don't not get therapy because the stats say if I do, I'm not going to be as happy. That's not what it is saying. So if we compare this to, for example, those who have done it in the past, the difference between never and yes in the past isn't large enough to keep somebody from seeking out therapy. And I think if you feel like you need counseling, you should definitely go get counseling. And so while it's an interesting statistic, and it's like, oh, just looking at that would be like, I should never go get therapy. That would be a really bad idea for me because it will ruin my life satisfaction. It really just depends on how you are looking at this, and it's gonna, how you interpret it for your particular situation. And then, this is my beautiful family. I know, aren't they cute? So this is me making a plug for marriage counseling. So a few years ago, it's probably been 2.5, 3 now, we started marriage counseling. Several months of weekly or bi-weekly meetings. And from the outside, like looking at this beautiful picture, nothing could possibly be wrong here. Look at these pretty people. I have the most beautiful children. I have a loving, adorable husband. Everything's great. And from the outside, nothing appeared to be wrong. Nothing to see there. But there was a really big problem. both my husband and I have a propensity to work a lot. Like, we get involved in something and we are in it. And so it's not good that I can just do that for days on end, and he likewise can work as much as he wants. We also have busy kids, we have a busy family life, we have a lot of things going on. And so during the course of counseling, we came to really notice what a deficit we had in quality time together. Because we figured out, oh my goodness, we never spend 50 minutes sitting down talking to each other. And so being in a counselor's office for 50 minutes every week, it's like, oh my goodness, we should probably be doing this more often. Maybe this is part of the problem here. And we should do some other things, like have some more fun and not work as much. But it was really interesting. So we had the 50 minutes for our session, and then we had a 20-minute commute there and a 20-minute commute back. And so we were hitting that 90 minutes once a week. And there came a point where we're like, I don't think we need to go to counseling anymore. I think all we need to do is just keep this date on our calendar and just spend time together. Like, that would probably solve a lot of these problems. And it was actually right. So if your spouse tells you that they can't find 50 minutes to go to marriage counseling, I tell you they can. I didn't think he could. And yet Wednesdays at 2 o'clock, we had a place to be, and he could be there. And I'm like, what do you mean? I did not know that this was possible, because try finding a counselor who will see you at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. You can make it happen. You actually can take that time, and you can do it if you're serious enough and committed enough to do that. And my husband, he wanted to come, but he's gonna be traveling for work tomorrow. He will be the first to tell you that that probably saved our marriage. Those small little increments, and really paying attention to, are we focusing on this thing that we say is important, but is it showing up on our calendar? Are we making it a priority? And so it's funny, because even now, if we don't have these regular intervals, I can tell my irritation goes up. We start picking fights with each other. The kids irritate me more, and I can always go back to, oh, guess what? We haven't gone out on a date in a couple of weeks. We haven't actually sat down and had a conversation. We've been talking about lots of other things, but an actual conversation where we're talking to one another and trying to, solve problems or think about what we're going to do for the future. That doesn't happen. I can tell. My barometer starts going off. So sometimes we think our problems aren't big enough for counseling, but if you are not satisfied with your life, if there's something that you think could be a little bit better, you're probably right, and that deserves your investigation. All right, here's a different picture. We're switching gears here. Another one of the largest indicators that impact overall life satisfaction is being part of a community and our relationship outside of our romantic partner. And so recently I've been listening to the audiobook, Build the Life You Want. And it's written by Dr. Arthur Brooks. He's a professor at Harvard who teaches classes on happiness, and it's co-written by Oprah Winfrey. And everybody loves Oprah. And in their chapter on friendship, this is what they say. Listen carefully. A life with close friends can be happy even when many of the things are going wrong. A life without friends is like a house in the winter in Massachusetts without heat. That evokes something, right? It's like, that's awful. Nobody wants that. And yet, some people do choose that. So social scientists like to ask questions like, when was the last time you had a private conversation in which you shared personal details, intimate feelings with another person? Next time we're going to include that question in our survey. So over the last 3 decades, the percentage of Americans who would answer never to this question has doubled. The percentage of Americans who say they have fewer than 3 close friends has doubled since 1990. And physician families have similar challenges when it comes to finding a community that is supportive and understanding of their life challenges. And so I've done my own research for years through polls and questions on social media. And so when I asked, this was when I was preparing for the presentation I mentioned earlier, there's a misunderstanding about physician families in their community. And so I was asking for, give me some specific examples. And one of them reported that when they were house hunting, so many of the real estate agents, as soon as they found out what their spouse did for a living, wanted to show them more expensive homes. Even when they said, no, that's not what our budget is, they kept pushing them towards more expensive homes. And then when they would go and see the home, if just one of the partners, the non-physician spouse partner, went to go view homes without the physician, they got questions like, where's your husband? Is he on the golf course? Now, my husband got a pair of golf clubs when he graduated from medical school, and he's used them, I think, 3 times. I don't even think he could tell you where they are right now. Maybe that was a reality a long time ago, but it is certainly not the reality now. Here's another one. I don't have many people I can talk to about what are very real problems. Even my family and friends discount my struggles with, at least you're married to your doctor. Am I never allowed to feel disappointment or frustration? So what did our survey say? We asked a series of questions that all returned very similar results, but 2 were more statistically significant than the others. This first one, we asked how often the survey participant felt left out, and those who never felt left out of their community had a mean life satisfaction of 87, and those who always felt left out had a mean life satisfaction of 57. And you can see that it trends. The more often that they felt left out of their community, the less satisfied they were with their life. And I should also note here that we didn't define community for them. They were each able to define what their community is. So they could have been using a general community, like the whole world, or a specific community. But it has been my observation that, much like the sentiments that I just shared earlier, that what it means to be a physician family is grossly misunderstood. It's not at all like what's portrayed in the movies or on television or in books. And this is something that I've developed a particular sensitivity to. Whenever a character in a movie or a book or in a television series is a doctor, or they're referencing the spouse of a physician, they get it wrong. Like 95% of the time, I'm like, I don't know these people. These people, I have never met them. I don't know anybody who is like this. This just isn't reality. And that's probably being generous 95% of the time. It's probably more like 99% of the time. More often than not, the reality is, and see if any of these ring true, that being part of a physician family often means being the one to bring meals to the sick, but never receiving meals in return. It might mean giving birth 30 minutes between cases, or consulting the OR schedule ahead of time so you can schedule your C-section, so we can get that all in. And then no paternity leave. I mean, maybe it's changed a little bit now, but it's like you have the baby and then someone goes back to work. And it's like, I did have a friend, bless them, lucky for them, for 4 months maternity leave. I'm like, what would that have been like? I have no idea. What would I do with my partner around for 4 months? But that would have been pretty amazing. It sometimes means showing up at family events without your spouse, or being too tired to go to events because it just takes too much energy to go alone. It might mean getting news of cancer alone and then making a phone call in the car and having to leave a voicemail because you can't get a hold of your spouse and you don't know when they're going to be able to check that message. It might mean not knowing what time your spouse is going to get home and having to answer for the 100th time your kids, when is dad going to be home? I don't know. And then I don't know. We've been through this for the last 10 years. I still don't know. Like, trying to stay calm. It might mean eating alone, cleaning up alone, watching television alone, going to bed alone, all the while wishing you weren't alone. And we could probably make a very long list if we spent some more time talking about all the ways that it's just the reality of a physician family life is not what we see, and therefore we are misunderstood in general. So interestingly, more individuals felt isolated than left out. And the mean scores kind of mirror the ones that we saw for feeling left out. Those reporting never had mean scores of 89, and those who always felt isolated had mean scores of 55. And so this is particularly important for our alliances. How do we encourage people to join us and to be part of a community, one that actually does understand their challenges? And I think that's one of the things that we can do, and what our alliances do is that we provide that type of community. It's something that we really need to capitalize on as we go into our larger community and invite people to be with us. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a community here doesn't necessarily mean the alliance. This could be, there's lots of different communities. We have church communities, we have school communities, we have neighborhood communities, and like special interest communities like rock climbing group. Each of these can really make an important impact on the life of a physician family in feeling understood and valued. And we all need multiple communities. It's not good to just have one community. But there is only one place where you can belong to a group of members who are going through or have gone through many of your same challenges, and that is the Alliance. You just can't get that anywhere else. So here's some really good news. Because you're here, you're part of this group. When we look at the AMA Alliance membership, what we see in terms of life satisfaction is that those who are members of the AMA have the 11-point difference in life satisfaction. That is significant. And this is true across every demographic. So it makes a difference. Earlier I was at dinner. You guys are longtime friends. You know each other, you know what's happening with each other's kids. That didn't happen by accident, but you chose to be a part of this community and to be involved and connect with one another. So how can we, again, reach out to others who might not have that community, but who fit what we offer and get them, how do you say, come, you'll be happier if you'll join us. But maybe that's the message that we should be sending, is that, hey, we can promise a 10% increase in life satisfaction on your membership. So again, what we are providing, it doesn't exist anywhere else. This is the only place to get it. So we've seen exponential growth in Facebook groups and online communities. The first group was Lives of Doctors' Wives, and that was created in May of 2010. And I joined in June of 2011, and I'm proud to be the 200th member. This group now has over 16,000 members. And this is undoubtedly the largest group of physician spouses on social media. At last count, we have at least 319 splinter or subgroups of that one original group, but that number is probably closer to 450. There's a ton of them I don't even know about. So we're going to spend some time talking about the difference between an online Facebook type community and a real face-to-face, in-person opportunity to have community. The COVID pandemic brought us all sorts of things. But one of the things it did bring was a lot of new research on social interactions, especially as it relates to the sudden shift away from face-to-face interactions in favor of digital communications. And as I just laid out, in the physician family community, we actually saw that shift happen earlier than COVID. Some people, COVID, that was the impetus that got them into these other groups. But we were way ahead of the game. And as we look at these numbers, during the same period of time, membership in face-to-face alliance groups like ours was decreasing at the same time that these other groups were increasing. In another study, researchers asked 3,000 adults during the pandemic in the early months, and they found that email, social media, online gaming, and texting were inadequate substitutes for in-person interactions, and that voice and video calls, although somewhat better, even the value of those technologies was questioned. And so the way that solitary activities, such as scrolling or surfing, reduce social connection, that's obvious. It's clear. If you're doing that, then you're not interacting with people. The visual I gave you earlier that time, my husband and I are in bed, he's watching a movie on his device, and I'm scrolling on mine. Technically, we're together, but we're not together. The internet, anytime you have a screen in front of your face, that is an individual solitary activity. And if you're doing that, what you're not doing is you're not making eye contact and you're not talking to an actual person with facial expressions. So virtual communications by design are meant to be interactive, and they should be less harmful, but they're not. We exchange depth of our communications for breadth. So, am I going to stop participating in these groups? Am I suggesting that you stop? No, but I also can't ignore the fact that my interactions with them mean that I'm not interacting with another person. So let's tie this back to the earlier stat we talked about, this time alone and awake and the impact it has on life satisfaction. So in 2013, the average American spent 11 to 13 hours per week online. In 2024, this number has significantly increased. Recent studies suggest that now the average is closer to 24 hours per week or 3.5 hours per day. We are spending more time online, less time with our partners and friends, and it's leaving us feeling more isolated and disconnected than ever. You may have thousands of friends on Facebook, but do you have somebody you can write down as your emergency contact at your kid's school? 100 people may like your last post, but who's going to notice that you seem a little bit off today? Over the years, I've collected comments from physicians, spouses, summing up their experience of feeling this burnout, because I don't know who first came up with it, but physician spouse burnout is real, and it's just as scary as regular burnout. So here's a couple of these comments. I never realized how scary and difficult burnout can be. I've been trying to prevent my partner from burning out, but that has left me in bad shape. This is what happens when you don't take care of yourself. There has to be another way. I feel like I've depleted my emergency reserves. I'm running on empty, but who is going to care about me? There's a lot of talk about physician burnout, but what about physician spouse burnout? I don't know how much longer I can do this. And I want to make a couple of comments about these comments. The first one, how many of you have tried to just do everything you could for your physician spouse so they wouldn't have to be bothered by anything? Like, can I just, how easy can I won't bother you with anything. I'll make sure you get plenty of sleep. I'll make sure you have great food. Meanwhile, I haven't slept. I'm eating awful. I haven't exercised, but I'm really focused on making sure that you have everything you need. And in the second one, who is going to care about me? All the focus is on your physician. Like, what can we do for them? They've got programs and initiatives, and there's all sorts of education rolling out to make sure that they're taken care of, and that they are, taking time for themselves, and having solitary moments where we're going to set up a yoga room or a meditation room. But who is looking out for them? She's asking, who's going to care about me? Who's going to notice when I start falling apart? And then that last one, how much longer can I do this? When we see, and we don't have stats on this, is we have several Facebook groups that are divorced physician spouses who've kind of congregated together. And I don't know how many are in that group, and I try to gain access to them. We're doing this research, this would be really important information for us to have, because we don't hear from the ones who've now divorced. So what that number is, we have no idea, but I do know that there are a lot more marriages in trouble than you might recognize. I showed you a picture of my family. Nobody was gonna believe that, but I sure did. So you may be experiencing burnout if you find yourself tiring ever sooner in the course of the week than you used to. If you become resentful of routine demands made by others, you're working hard, but feeling like you're not accomplishing much. You frequently end your days with a sense of not having enough time, enough accomplishments, enough thanks, and so on. You're feeling less satisfied by your life. These are just some of the sentiments expressed by physician spouses in regards to their burnout. And I appreciate what the Ohio Medical Association Alliance has done recently. You had that great webinar on noticing trauma in medical families. And that's something we do need to talk about. And one of the things we need to talk more about is that while the family can certainly help identify burnout in our physicians, it's really hard to see if you're burned out yourself. And so then it feels like, oh, I got one more thing to do. I've got to pay attention to this other thing, but I'm also drowning. It's just really hard to see when somebody else is struggling if you're also struggling. One of my my favorite songs is from the musical Dear Evan Hansen. And the first time I heard these lines from the song The Anonymous One, it's just a little line from the chorus. I knew exactly who they were talking about. And so if you know the musical, you'll hear it, but I'm not going to sing it. But the line is, I'm really not going to. The parts we can't tell, we carry them well, but that doesn't mean they're not heavy. And I think what we know is that physicians are really good. Physician spouses are really good about putting on the face that everything is okay, everything's gonna be fine, but we are still carrying very heavy burdens. So, we've covered a lot of information today, and there's more to come, just not tonight. We're nearly done tonight. It's been estimated that 20% of the driving factors of burnout are attributed to the individual and 80% are attributed to the organization. And I want you to consider that you do belong to the organization of medicine. What we saw from Dr. Greimer's research when she was studying secondary impacts of physician burnout, the secondary trauma of that, is that transfers. So that can go both ways. If your spouse is feeling burned out, you're likely going to feel burned out. You are part of that system. And so while it's important that, yes, we work on that 80%, what we can do right now is we can work on that 20%. So if you want to increase your life satisfaction, there are some things that you can start doing today, as soon as we leave this meeting, that will give you the greatest return on your investment. The first is you can prioritize time with your spouse, starting tonight. If you can consistently average 91 minutes or more per day, you can change your relationship, you can change your satisfaction with your life. The second thing is you can be involved with the AMA. You can be involved at your local, your state, and your national levels. You can volunteer for committees, you can attend the meetings, you can bring other people with you, invite your friends. They might not even know about the Alliance. You might be holding on to the best secret in town. Tell them about it, invite them to come with you. And then when people come, be welcoming, and be happy to see them, invite them to come again. And the third thing that you can do is you can exchange some of your communications. You can go old school. So instead of sending a text or communicating with friends online, try swapping it out for a quick phone call. Really talk to your friends. It's hard to bare your soul to 100 people. It's hard to really share important and maybe vulnerable things about your life with thousands of people, but you can do it with one person. Have deep, meaningful conversations. And if you're still a little skeptical, I included a screenshot of a note that I received earlier this week. And this is from somebody that I've started working with, and she says, and we've been implementing these things, like, are you spending time with your spouse? Are you only relying on digital communication, or are you reaching out to other people? And she said, here's a brief report. It's been a better few weeks, spending more time with my husband in the evening, doing chores together. I've called a few friends for real-time conversations versus Marco Polo, went to my YMCA this week to run, downloaded an app called Fabulous that is helping make daily habits and rituals. My new semester started on Monday, and it's good to be interacting again. This stuff works. So in conclusion, just as the AMA is leading the movement to fight the system-level drivers of physician burnout, the AMA Alliance is positioned to be the leader in information and programs to address the secondary burnout in physician families. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for inviting me. If anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you.